Well, I'd have to see what the possibilities are. The big concern is when you extend unemployment, people have a tendency not to look for work as vigorously as if it was coming to an end. So, the object is to get people back to work, not to extend unemployment.
Is the unemployment rate low enough to start worrying about that yet? About
Well,
people being disincentivized to go back to work?
I think there are signs of an economic recovery that are real. I think there is traction in the economy right now, and what we're hearing from employers is that they do have jobs for people who are willing to work. So, you got to put all this on the table and look at it.
I'm going to Baxley tomorrow to shoot a milk store. No farm bill yet. Status update?
We think that we're close on the farm bill. As you know, we have passed it through the House and the Senate. It's been in negotiations for several months. The drag on the farm bill is really the food stamp section, which is now almost 80% of the entire bill. And we've reformed a lot of the direct production agriculture, the commodity groups, but we haven't really had significant reform on food stamps, and that's what the concern is.
The story essentially tomorrow is warning people if this deal doesn't get done, there's this milk cliff that people have started to talk about, the $7 gallon.
Well,
number one, should people fear it?
I think we will not get there. I think that there is a lot of quirkiness in agriculture legislation that kind of floats the possibility that you go back to a 1934 milk policy, but we have faced that before and moved around it. I think the big issue is just pass a farm bill and you don't have these kind of questions lingering.
Do people appreciate, though, how much it costs to produce a gallon of milk?
I don't think people in America understand the cost of agriculture in general. If you look at what Americans pay for groceries, it's one of the lowest percentages on a dollar that any country in the world has ever seen. We have more of a problem with obesity than we do with availability when it comes to food, and so I think that Americans, we have a really great, abundant food supply at an inexpensive cost, and people have taken food for granted because of it.
Is there going to be another fight over the credit ceiling, and where will you stand on that for this?
Well, we will have another debt ceiling debate probably in March. Depends, the Treasury Department often says, well, the deadline is blank, and then they push it back. So it's hard to say, but I think that the House, the Senate, and the White House want to get together on that and try to avoid any kind of fiscal cliff. I'll just have to look at it very carefully. What I'm concerned is if we don't get spending under control, for every dollar we spend, 42 cents is borrowed, and we have to have some long-term entitlement reform, long-term reform of spending in general, and that to me is something we always postpone, and we need to tie the two actions in together.
Now, as you are in a Senate campaign, do you have a different area? Do you have different areas of emphasis in terms of issues as you're headed towards a primary with opponents such as Paul Brown than you would in a general election against Democratic?
Well, I'm still talking about national defense, and as a member of the Defense Committee and somebody who's represented 5 out of our 8 military installations, I truly believe that our soldiers, airmen, and sailors need to be well-armed, well-equipped, well-trained, and that is a priority of mine, and it always has been. Number 2, jobs through the private sector, and that means less regulatory overreach, such as things like Obamacare or Dodd-Frank or EPA regulations that hurt investment capital. And we need to have as many jobs created in the private sector as possible, and one way to do that is to get government off the backs of private businesses.
On that sort of note, we haven't had the chance to ask you about free lunch since it happened, since the
Yes.
whole dust up. Third parties, last 3 years, have given you $4,200 and your staff in meals. Codel's $24,000 in per diems. Expenses from the House office, $4,100 in meals. Isn't this a free lunch?
This is what we need in America. We need workfare over welfare. I learned a lot when I was 14 and 15 years old doing chores inside and outside the household. And as a result, I grew up with a good work ethic. The question is, and that particular discussion always was about the work ethic in America. And it wasn't about free lunches as much as the concept of young people learning the work ethic that is so important to the economic vitality of America.
I think, though, that after that conversation, would happen, I think one thing that upset people was asking, does Congress work hard? Do you think Congress works hard? I mean, 159 days in session last year.
Well, I can say this as somebody who woke up early this morning and will get home late tonight, that I've always worked a 60 or 70-hour work week. And when you're in Washington, you're voting on bills, you're having hearings and doing legislative type activities. But when you're in the district, you're going around, you're speaking to Rotary clubs, you're visiting schools, you're listening to constituent groups, you're having meetings in the office. And often those meetings, for example, tomorrow I'll be in Effingham County at 7:30 in the morning, and I'll fly to Washington for votes that start at 6:30 at night. So 10, 12-hour days are pretty common. But it still boils down to workfare, and that's what we need to have in America is a good work ethic.
On the sort of other half of that coin, after the conversation of 159 days in session, I think the other concern and the reason people get upset is, who does Congress work for? I mean, when they see these numbers of where members of Congress, not Jack Kingston, 535 members of Congress, are getting meals, are taking political contributions, I think they ask, who is Congress working for?
Well, Congress works for 435 political districts and divisions in the United States of America and run on a 2-year term in which the people can recall them at any given election that they want. And that's what representative democracy is about, is members going to Washington but coming home and answering the tough questions. And I would say also to the challengers, particularly those on the left who think Congress needs to vote more often and pass more bills and more laws, more regulations, that I'm a believer that sometimes Congress not being in session, it's not a big thing in itself. Having members home listening to constituents, that's a good thing.
This used to be part of your district, not anymore. At home, when this dust-up happened, I think a lot of people were surprised it came from you. On one side, you get, beat up and have to go to the other and apologize for, let's fix Obamacare rather than continue on this conversation. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I think people are wondering, is a statewide campaign changing Jack Kingston?
Not at all. I've always talked about workfare over welfare. And in that particular conversation which you referenced, the question was, when you were 14 or 15-year-old, did you have a job in which you learned something that you still apply to your day-to-day life? I believe that children, young people, teenagers of all socioeconomic groups can benefit from work. And I think sociologically and economically, it's a very good thing for our country. So, that's what the discussion was about. Now, because I am in a statewide race and because I am seen as the Republican, the Democrats would have the toughest time to beat, then anything I say, it's cut and spliced and manipulated for a particular political advantage. And that's something that I've got to get used to. It's hard in today's society to have a discussion where you want to challenge the status quo because of the I got you politics. Yesterday, for example, I was in Gwinnett County. Michelle Nunn, the Democrat, has 2 people stalking me. Everywhere I go, they're recording what I say. They're probably here today. And that's fair game, but it hurts your ability to have discussions when, any particular part of it can be pulled down and downloaded into a computer to cut and splice. I mean, you can do that with any conversation in the world and make somebody look like they're fulfilling a narrative, which really did not take place.
This is a campaign event. How's it going? You got a fundraising number?
Our fundraising is on track, and we're
You have 9 days to tell me. You want to tell me now?
Actually, hopefully we'll still get a few checks in, and so the number will be even better than it is. But I can say what I'm very proud about in terms of our fundraising is we believe, number one, we'll have enough money. Number two, we have a large number of small donors and a great geographic spread about our donations. So we think it's moving in the right direction.
I have one final quick question about your comment that you made. What are you hearing from your constituents? Have you gotten any feedback from that, or have you, when you went on CNN and did the segment on CNN, that kind of?
I think as people take a step back, fair-minded people, not necessarily political types who want to frame you in a certain way, but I think fair-minded people say, oh, you're talking about 14 or 15-year-olds working of all socioeconomic groups. I understand. And by the way, when I was 14 years old, I did blank, and I'm a better person for it. And so we're hearing from a lot of people who said, you know, those were the jobs that formed my work ethic when I was a teenager.
If there's nothing else, Joanne wanted me to ask you about Smithfield Farms being acquired by the Chinese. Does it bother you?
Well, it does concern me that we want to make sure that everybody has the same food safety consumer standards, and that we need to make sure that the USDA and the FDA know what they're up to. And I think when you deal with China, and I've been through food processing plants in China, some of them are really clean and some of them aren't as clean, and we want to make sure, particularly if you're importing food from China, that it's up to the American standards.
You studied economics. I mean, this doesn't just give them access to our food supply. They can also take the technology Smithfield has in the United States and scale it out on a Chinese scale, you know, at economies of scale that could threaten.
You know, China doesn't even have to acquire Smithfield or another manufacturing plant in order to hack into our computer systems and learn proprietary practices, and so that is a concern. Cybersecurity, not just targeting the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, but any private business in the United States of America. There is government-sponsored hacking going on in China and Russia and a number of other countries. Security and electronic verification than there would be about amnesty. Anything that comes close to amnesty is not going to get through the House. One other thing that you have not mentioned, though, and I appreciate you bringing that up because it triggered, on the port, the bill has been passed by the House and by the Senate. It's in conference, and we hope that the differences get ironed out by early February. And the concern is the longer it's delayed, the longer the state has to wait until they can start the mitigation portion of the project. And the state can't really start until the federal government has approved it.
Do you think voting by early February or just out of conference?
I think as soon as it's out of conference, we'll vote on it. So I'm hopeful early February. I was hoping it was going to be November, and I'm going to do everything that I can to push it.